In this episode of Detroit Performs, an artist creates wearable sculptures, a jeweler handcrafts intricate cufflinks, and we indulge in the glamour of a bygone era. It's all ahead on this edition of Detroit Performs.
Funding for Detroit Performs is provided by the Michigan Council for Arts and Cultural Affairs and the National Endowment for the Arts, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.
Hello and welcome to Detroit Performs. I'm your host, DJ Oliver. This week we're exploring the Nick Cave exhibition Here at the Cranbrook Art Museum. Set in Bloomfield Hills, Michigan, this museum has served both the students of the Cranbrook Academy of Art and the surrounding public since 1930. All of our segments today are featuring people who create wearable art. Our first segment highlights Nick Cave, a former student of the Cranbrook Academy who came back with the production Here. The whole production includes this museum exhibition, as well as performances set to take over the Metro Detroit area. Let's take a look.
I can either create art that's offensive, defensive, or I could create art that is accessible. I think my chosen art form is really sort of, I think it's sculpture, but sculpture that also has the ability to be brought to the body and then utilized in a series of performance activities. I'm a graduate from Cranbrook, and I think what I received from that experience was knowing how to trust myself. And so I think that was the beginning of me, after graduation, taking charge of my life and recognizing that this is how I want to go about existing in the world and using art as a vehicle to arrive at different perspectives. A sound suit is a sculptural object that has the possibility of being worn on the body, but the sound is generated from materials that make noise, such as bottle caps, twigs, raffia, buttons. So, the body becomes the carrier for this wearable instrument. The interesting thing about the work that one's identity is hidden, so it hides gender, race, class. So we're forced to look at the work without judgment. When I really sort of get down to, what it politically means, it really is about removing all of that so we can then come to a point where we have to be open to something that is unfamiliar. And how do we respond to that? Detroit was such a critical part of my education, being an urban environment and yet being this rural sort of setting. It just really created the balance that I needed. So it's really me also giving back to Detroit what it sort of provided for me. I want to function as a change agent, and also I'm interested in the role as an artist with a civic responsibility. That, are there ways in which, I can come here and help sort of rejuvenate, help jumpstart, help recognize the amazing talent here. Nick Cave Here is such a vast project. There's the solo exhibition here at Cranbrook Art Museum, which, there's a lot of educational sort of programming around that. But I tend to bring the physical work to a city and then really start to do research and to pick my cast from the city. So we bring the work and then hire the community to build the work, leaving an imprint versus an impression. At the Detroit School of Art, we're presenting the project titled Heard. So we're working with the dance and music department there.
Cranbrook approached us. They said that we have this year-long project involving Nick Cave, and we would like him to bring his work to your students at Detroit School of Art, so we just jumped at the chance.
So it's really interesting for me as a artist, choreographer, to be able to come into a school setting and to provide a different point of view to these students and allow them to be part of building an experience.
For them to be able to take what they have learned in the classroom and then apply it to an actual performance where they're still sharing their talents with other people and working with a professional artist is just a great combination, especially being in a performing arts school. He's looking to work with our dance students to do a performance that incorporates his sound suit and a performance at the River Days Festival.
For me, the project here is a project that, it's just getting me closer and closer to how I want to function as a citizen in America. And so I think that, this project offers me, again, another amazing platform to speak about what I stand for and what I stand behind. So I'm excited about it and real excited about coming here and working and being effective and leaving with a purpose being delivered.
You can learn more about Nick Cave's exhibition Here, as well as all the artists you saw here today on DetroitPerforms.org. Christine Bosler is an independent metalsmith and jeweler living in Detroit. Her eclectic pieces have caught the eye of locals and people all over the world. We went out and visited her in her home studio where she was in production on Cufflinks.
I'm from the east side of Detroit, East English Village neighborhood over by Caju Cafe and that side of town. My mom, growing up, was we're gonna make it from scratch around the house. We made wrapping paper, we made our curtains, we made our clothes, we cooked from scratch. So I guess it was always kind of there in the background. I find everything in the process and the material. Looking at something like this, just a pile full of little nothing and seeing a possibility in it, that to me is like probably the most rewarding thing. Although I really enjoy watching how people interact with my work and knowing that it's all handmade and that the metal is clean and pure. It's not plated, plastic, or glass. It's real. Those things just make me really happy to know that I can do it and that people like it. A lot of stuff that I do has recycled components, and I will use broken plates from neighbors, bricks from my yard, rusted metal that I find on the street, a whole variety of sources. It literally is looking at textures and pattern and rearranging spikes, little pokey texture, and playing with process, drilling holes, filing little spikes, soldering them all in there, playing with them between straight and curved. I'm in Boston, Edison, Detroit. Technically, I'm south of Boston, Edison, but it's still part of the neighborhood. I spend all my time here. I think it's a perseverance that you see in the streets and in the neighborhoods that really is the inspiration in the studio. Being your own business person isn't easy. Being an artist isn't easy, and yeah, it's kind of a luxury, to be able to have the opportunity to work for yourself. And to me, looking at people on the block and the struggles they're going through, it reminds me how lucky I am to keep pushing. There's a lot of supporting industry here. Being that we are a manufacturing town, the history of a city being so deep in manufacturing, I like working recycled metals. I think people like that. I think people like the recycled material and that I try to be clean and ethical. And mining's a really dirty process. There's so much floating around that's being recycled all the time. if there was a need, that would be another story, but there really isn't. To know that I'm putting wedding rings on fingers and that those rings are going to be there probably for the rest of their lives. Knowing that you're a major part of some sort of ceremony, a commitment ceremony or a wedding ceremony, is pretty neat. I've been really enjoying the cufflinks. There's a lot of process involved. There's a lot of steps. All right, so we're gonna get started here. The first thing we do when we're making cufflinks, or when I make cufflinks, is to build out the wall section, which is this part right in here, or on this part right in here. I'm constantly thinking in my head, like, how can I refine this and make it better? And I really like doing the different moving components. For me, that's a really neat aspect. So what we're doing is we're fitting the hinges. So now we're sending the wire through, and that's going to be what makes all the joints pivot. I work on these cufflinks from stock, so we're looking at pre-made wire. Like this is where we're going to start, and we're going to make a whole bunch of different components. We're going to wrap the walls and cut the walls open and then solder them together, and then we're going to cut some discs for the base, and then we'll stamp them with the hallmarks so that everybody knows that it's sterling silver, and it'll have my maker's mark, and I like to include a Detroit mark on it so they know where everything's from. After that, we'll solder the walls to the base and then turn them over and solder a little peg on to connect the arm hardware. And then we'll turn around and make all the arm hardware and the swivels and then clean them up. So this is it. This is, it before we figure out what we're inserting. It could be a lot of things. I have a drawer full of things over here for us to look at if you want. Bicycle tires, records, bricks, slate, sandstone, agate, ceramic. If you can do it here, you can do it anywhere. Detroit is, in my mind, some of the harshest critics. They will tell you if what you're making is bad. They'll tell you if it doesn't fit. They'll tell you how you should have done it. So if you can make your business work here, you know you're doing something right. You can do it anywhere you want. Outside my small jewelry business, I do make larger one-of-a-kind pieces for the runway and different types of different scenarios, and a lot of that work tends to look at fashion in a critical way. I think it's good for everybody to take a look and see what they wear and why they wear it and how that applies to our culture now and previous to, and other cultures, how it's related.
To find out more about Christine Bosler and all the artists featured here today, head to DetroitPerforms.org. Now, let's check out some upcoming events happening in and around Detroit. To discover more events in Greater Detroit, visit ixity.com. Up next, we feast our eyes on the stunning gowns and furnishings of designer Charles James. Though his work would feature most prominently in Hollywood and New York high society, a James retrospective as comprehensive as this can only be found in Texas.
Charles James is considered one of America's first couturiers, perhaps America's only couturier, and he rose to prominence during the 1940s and 50s with his very avant-garde fashion designs. James had created this theory of a wall of error between the body and fabric. He felt it was one of his greatest achievements as a fashion designer. So a wall of error, thinking about proximity, relationships between people, architecture, and this idea in James's fashion design itself. John and Dominique de Menil were art collectors. They came from France and they arrived in the United States in the 1940s, settling in Houston in 1944. I think once Dominique de Menil met Charles James and became privy to his work, she immediately saw him as an artist. The exhibition opens up with this stunning dress, this red concert gown. James often referred to it as the March of Dimes dress. It's approximately from 1949. It was designed for a March of Dimes gala. It's an excellent example of James's work. It's a fusion of Victorian design aesthetics and forms with a very sort of modern, artistic, forward-looking mashup of materials. One of the earliest pieces in the collection is a reefer coat from 1947. It's a beautiful example of this idea of a wall of air. It drapes away from the body in the back, creating that space between the body and the fabric. Another dress in the exhibition is called the Infanta cocktail dress. It is a brown, not a usual color for a cocktail dress. So this was very James again, sort of unusual colors one wouldn't expect. There's a gorgeous ball gown known as the bustle dress. And it is, again, this interesting combination of materials with sort of a brown wool crepe bustle wrapped around the back of the dress, very Victorian again. And then you have this unusual mix of colors and materials, velvet with brown wool, and then satin. So again, his sort of unusual mix of materials with colors, and then historical references that make his garments so unique. So in the de Menil home, James not only created furniture for the house, but he also intervened in the structures of the house, not necessarily architecturally, but on the surface of them. He sort of wallpapers with felt that he's dyed butterscotch, intense fuchsia, even just plain white felt. And it creates a texture and sort of a richness of color that I don't think one would achieve otherwise with paint. I was always, again, obsessed with the idea of the antique, the old, something that has a patina to it. So the colors are slightly dirty. And in the hallway, he uses a bubblegum pink. And then in her dressing room, he paints a beautiful checkerboard of airy colors, aqua, pale blue, gray. And these are some of the color introductions that he brings into the house on the structural surfaces. You see a relationship between his fashion design and the way he thinks about interior design. James was obsessed with the curve. He was obsessed with the idea of the female body and its curvature. And this is very much exemplified in the pieces of furniture you see in the exhibition, one of which is a chaise longue. And again, these sort of refined materials combined with the rough hewn. So the legs are done out of a wrought iron, but the shape is like a female body. There is the lip sofa, perhaps Charles James's most iconic piece of furniture. It was designed originally for the de Menils, and it was completed in 1952. Looks like a pair of lips. Another piece is the banquette. It's a large sweeping sofa that resided in the de Menil's dining room for lounging after dinner or while one is entertaining. I think what would be great for people to take away from this exhibition is to think about the conceptual aspects of a fashion designer. What I think is beautiful about Charles James is that he brings a poetry to fashion design. And this is, to me, what James was about, and the commission of the Dimenels of James was about, was this idea of living in life and how fashion elaborates that, but it also becomes a mechanism for the poetic.
And that wraps it up for this edition of Detroit Performs. As always, for more arts and culture, head to DetroitPerforms.org, where you'll find featured videos, blogs, and information on upcoming arts events. Also, check us out on Facebook and Twitter. I'd like to thank the Cranbrook Art Museum and Nick Cave for allowing us to explore his exhibition here. Until next Tuesday, get out there and show the world how Detroit performs, y'all. I am DJ Oliver. Thanks for watching, guys.
Funding for Detroit Performs is provided by the Michigan Council for Arts and Cultural Affairs and the National Endowment for the Arts, and by contributions to your PBS station from viewers like you. Thank you.